Another miracle run if they want to make it to the playoffs. Even in a banged up NFC East as it is, this is probably going to at least require a winning record, which sets up a pretty tough task for them going down the stretch. So we will discuss that and lots more during this week's episode. Let's get right into the offense, because one of the big storylines this week, obviously, is the difference between how this team looked against Philadelphia and how they looked this time against Philadelphia. Week 1, RG3 was not RG3.
Right.
Offense wasn't able to accomplish anything that they really wanted to do. I mean, Kyle Shanahan said it a number of times that they weren't even able to implement their game plan. What are we going to see, assuming that they don't fall into an early hole, what are we going to see on offense this week that they would have liked to have done in Week 1?
Well, hopefully a little bit more of Alfred Morris than we saw in Week 1. You know, one thing Kyle Shanahan told us, I want to say a few weeks after that loss to Philly, because they weren't ready to admit it right away, but it was the fact that not having any game film on either side of the ball was a huge detriment. And you know, one of the things he said was, you can make yourself crazy as a coordinator watching game film from the preseason because half the guys aren't even on the roster anymore.
Right.
So you're kind of chasing shadows and looking, seeing ghosts, and you're trying to figure out what's going on. You're trying to piece things together, and it can actually be too much information. So I think the fact that they now have 10 games to get a look at that revamped defense, the personnel, the tendencies, what they like to do, what they do in certain situations, I think that's going to help a lot more. But what the Redskins need to do is they need to get off to a good, strong start, establish that running game, and give the ball to Alfred, please.
You know, I said that the worst week to face the Eagles this year was probably going to be Week 1, and it turned out to be the case because you just didn't know. And Jim Haslett said that he watched a lot of Oregon film over the years, kind of get an idea about what Chip Kelly was going to do and what the offense was going to look like. And it turned out they looked a lot like Oregon did. And now, at the time, everybody was healthy. You know, your first game of the year, you've got fresh legs. Michael Vick was fresh. LaShawn McCoy was fresh, and they looked great. That was probably the best half of football they played. Well, maybe until the 7-touchdown barrage a couple of weeks ago. But that was certainly, they looked very good during that game. I don't expect them really to look quite as good this game. I mean, the Oakland game, let's go face it. Nick Foles is not going to throw 7 touchdowns again. I really hope not anyway.
Never say never.
That would be, but and I do think that the Redskins will have some things for the Eagles on defense. It's just a matter of can their personnel match up against it? I mean, they've clearly struggled matching up. So at this point, I don't think it's really so much game film or trickery. It's just really just being able to play your position and matching up man to man against some pretty talented Eagles guys.
Now, one thing that I thought was pretty interesting is that, especially in the locker room on Monday, guys getting back into the swing of things, a lot of guys, D'Angelo Hall was one of them, said, even weeks later, still said that they were not caught off guard by the up-tempo offense. They weren't hurting out there in Week 1, even though you saw players cramping up, having to come out for plays, especially in the fourth quarter. A lot of those guys were gassed. They still claim that they weren't. Is that what do you attribute that to then? If it wasn't a lack of
That's
condition.
elite athletes not wanting to admit that they were dominated by a team that was in better condition and more prepared to run all that up-tempo stuff. I think now that we're in Week 11, I think that across the NFL, everyone's in better condition right now.
Absolutely.
I don't see it being as much of an issue. It's going to be a lot cooler for one thing, and that's something you can't overlook. I mean, it was pretty warm that night. That makes a huge difference. You're going to see less cramping, but I think they also probably have a better sense for the fact that they're going to need to rotate a lot more. You're going to have to rotate your defensive linemen, your linebackers, even more than you did in Week 1. So I just think the element of surprise is not going to be there this time around. I think that's going to really help out the Redskins. But one thing I think is going to give them trouble, if you look at the last 2 games, the Eagles have been huge on big strike, fast strike touchdowns, long passes to Riley Cooper, a long pass to Deshaun Jackson. I know it was batted up and he still ended up coming down with it. LaShawn McCoy had a long run for a touchdown, and that's something this defense has struggled with through the years. Under Haslett is giving up those long strike type touchdowns, and that's obviously something they're going to have to take away if they're going to win this game.
Now, I'm not going to say that D'Angelo Hall might have been saying something in the media that wasn't 100% accurate. I don't think football players ever do that, do they? Did they ever, say things in the media?
Absolutely not.
No, absolutely not. Nobody in the media ever kind of puts together a good face. But let's face it, were they prepared? Sure. I mean, I'm sure that they said, hey, this is going to be an up-tempo offense. Here's the film. They knew it coming in, but it's one thing to look at it on film, another thing to actually face it when you've never really seen, that up-tempo. I mean, there's no huddle, and then there's what Chip Kelly did, and what the Oregon Ducks are still doing, and what Chip Kelly is doing for the Eagles. So it's different to actually go against it. Look, they're going to be in shape to face what happens. They're going to be ready for substitutions. So I really don't think that's going to be the key to the game. It's just really, like I said before, it's going to be matching up. I don't think that the up-tempo thing is going to have much to do with the outcome of this game.
One thing that I actually think will play a role in this game and could really be a key, although it doesn't look like it on the surface, is the rotation. I talked to the guy from the Eagles website yesterday. We talked a lot about how their defense has gotten in the mode. Their defense is playing 35 minutes a game on average. So they've gotten into rotating really well. That's something that the Redskins really couldn't do in Week 1 because they were so shallow on depth at that time. That was without Jarvis Jenkins. That was without Rob Jackson.
Right.
They weren't able to put in playmakers that were any good at that point if it wasn't the starters. So, I really think that is going to play a key role, and I think that the depth that the Redskins have at this point is going to play certainly into their favor.
Yeah, getting Jarvis Jenkins and Rob Jackson is going to help out a whole lot. I think we're going to see a healthy dose of Nick Barnett spelling London Fletcher as well. Mm-hmm. I thought, going back and looking at the film, it looked like London was sucking wind a little bit towards the end of that game.
Yeah, probably.
But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, the improved depth should help. But you know what? The thing that should worry the Redskins is the fact that this is an Eagles offense that is starting to click on all cylinders right now. Foles has come in and has seized that job and is looking really, really good. I mean, 16 touchdowns versus no interceptions.
And why won't Chip Kelly just name him the starter, like going forward at this point? He refuses to do that.
Some guys, well, first of all, you got Michael Vick, and you don't know if you're ever going to have to go back to him because of an injury, and you don't want to. You
don't want him sulking.
No.
You don't want to close the door because sometimes you can lose a player for the rest of the season.
Absolutely.
You can't afford to have that happen. And you know what? We don't know what Nick Foles' mindset is like, but there are a lot of players in professional sports who need to have that carrot dangling in front of them.
Absolutely.
Who need to know that, hey, this isn't my job. I have to be good week to week. And maybe he's one of those guys who might, take the foot off the gas a little bit when he's named starter, and they don't want that to happen.
Right, and they're certainly not committed to him. They've said all along that they're looking for their franchise guy. So why commit to a guy that you don't know if that's going to be him? Right. We're going to come back to the offense, and certainly the Eagles' offense as well. But going into the break here, we're going to listen to Mike Shanahan talking about special teams, particularly the promotion of Nick Williams from the practice squad. Could he play a factor in the return game? We'll see.
Bold prediction.
Let's hear what Shanahan had to say.
You guys added Nick Williams. Do you anticipate him returning punts this weekend, and what's he going to bring to the table?
Well, we'll get a chance to evaluate him this week. Nick has done a good job since he's been here. He's a hard worker. I think we all know he could return punts, kickoffs, slot receiver. I think he'd play X or Z. We'll evaluate him this week and see where he's at, and make a game time decision.
6 last year, obviously. Are there similarities, differences, things you can draw on?
Well, the only thing I think we can draw on is that our goal is to be 4-6, and I think if you do that, you have that type of mindset, then you got a chance to take care of business. I think that's what we did today. We had good practice today. We know Philly is playing well, exceptionally well the last couple games, and we had the type of practice that you needed.
Sounds like progress is being made ahead of Philadelphia. Going into segment 2, we're going to talk about special teams, talk about 3-6. Stick around. All right, and welcome back for segment number 2 of This Week at the Park. And we heard from Mike Shanahan at the end of the first segment talking about special teams. This has been an issue all year long. They've had issues in coverage, in kicks, in punts, in returns. Basically, every facet of special teams has been an issue at some point during the season. In 4 out of 5 of the special teams categories, they are ranked 30th or lower. With 32 teams, that's not matching up terribly well. So,
They need expansion. They need more teams.
right, exactly. That,
London, Los Angeles, get
middle
some
them out a
teams
little
in
bit.
there, could we?
Exactly. So, they made the choice to switch away from Josh Morgan in the kick return last week.
Right.
You saw a little bit of a spark from Niles Paul, who had the job last year. He actually became the first tight end in NFL history to have 5 or more returns in consecutive seasons. So, good job, Niles. But
Random stat of the week.
is that a long-term solution for them, or are they going to end up going with a guy like Nick Williams, who's a little bit younger, a little bit shiftier, is not your prototypical lead blocker like Niles Paul has been in the return game?
I mean, personally, I'd like to see Niles Paul as the up returner and have Nick Williams. I like my returners to be small and shifty. That's just what seems to work.
That's how you like them?
now Niles, to his credit, uses his brawn, his speed. He's got a lot of speed for a guy his size,
Right.
and likes to run people over, and that's fine and good. And I think when having him as the up back, maybe you can switch when you need a different type of return, but you're looking for yardage here. You're looking to get to the 20-yard line, which, God, that has just been a struggle all season. I mean, it's kind of become a joke in the press box at games. Like when they get to like the 18, it's like, oh, are they going to get to the 20? And sometimes they don't. But
Right.
Niles did get them to the 20 consistently. I mean, this is not on any inside information because we don't know what's going to happen next week. But I'd imagine that Niles is going to be a kick returner, and you're probably going to see Nick as a punt returner. But who knows what's going on in those meeting rooms? We'll find out on Sunday.
I'm not really sure what the point of having a kick returner who can't take it to the house is. I mean, why would you have a guy back there who can just bring it out to the 20 and get tackled and fall down? I mean, especially in this day and age where the kicks are, being basically sailing through the end zone half the time.
Right.
The only guys that are really game changers are the guys who can take it, if not to the house, then at least get a couple of moves here and there and get out to the 50, something like that to really flip field position. Because as an offense, what's the difference between, you're starting at the 18, you're starting at the 23? I mean, really at that point, you've got a long drive ahead of you, and that yardage is not the important yardage in that drive. So I do like Nick Williams. I mean, I saw Nick Williams at Richmond training camp. Mm-hmm. That guy's got some shiftiness to him. He's got some quick. And in fact, he might be called Nick the Quick after this game if he does anything, kind of interesting.
You trademarking that?
I'm trademarking Nick the Quick. You saw it here first. So yeah, I like him as the kick returner. If they give him that chance, certainly I'd have to imagine that he'll get at least one shot to return a punt.
One thing that I think is actually interesting is that Niles Paul is a guy who you can tell from the way he plays, he relishes contact. He loves to hit guys. And so it's almost counterintuitive to have him as a kick returner, somebody who's trying to avoid those guys, certainly as a punt returner. But I agree with what you say. He certainly has the north-south speed that they're looking for. Maybe he doesn't avoid contact like your prototypical kick returner, but yeah, you'll probably see Nick Williams. Nick Williams actually talked to the media earlier this week in the locker room after his promotion to the active roster, and let's hear what he had to say.
It's great. I'm super excited, thankful for the opportunity. When I was put on practice squad, my goal was to try and get called up as fast as possible, and that was the approach I took at practice, and I'm just super thankful and happy.
When they're cycling through guys one after another and you're still not getting a chance, how hard is it to kind of stay with it?
I don't think it's really that. I mean, it's not as difficult if you have like long-term beliefs and long-term goals. It wasn't really that frustrating, and it's not like they're cycling through guys who aren't that good. I mean, these guys can play some ball, so and it's really just sometimes when the return game's going really well, it looks like it's all the returner, and it's really the 10 guys in front of him. And sometimes when it's not going so well, it looks like the returner's making mistakes. So it's really a group effort, and it's kind of like playing quarterback of the offense as being the returner. The guy gets either the blame or the credit, but it's really 11 guys out there.
When Mike told you, or whoever it was that told you, what was the thought going through your head at that moment?
I was actually speaking to my agent, and I was outside in shorts and a T-shirt, and it was probably 30 degrees out, and I couldn't feel anything. So I was pretty elated.
Not very often that you see that much excitement over a guy getting promoted from the practice squad to the regular roster, but clearly he's excited. Clearly he knows that he has an opportunity. This is not just roster fodder. He's probably going to get thrown in there pretty quickly. On the flip side of special teams, on coverage, they've been a little bit better over the last couple weeks, certainly after having a couple disastrous games against the Cowboys and then the Bears. They face another tough test this week with Deshaun Jackson, who is one of the unusual top paid wide receivers who is still in the punt return game. I mean, that is a vicious job.
Yeah.
And he's not the biggest guy. He takes a lot of big hits. But, you know, what are they going to have to do? Who's going to have to step up this week in order to contain somebody like him?
You know, I think that they made their biggest adjustment when they went out and they got Trenton Robinson and Josh Hull. I mean, those are two guys who are they are junkyard dogs. I mean, they aren't guys who are aspiring starting safeties who may or may not want to get their nose dirty. They know if they're going to earn a living in this league, that's what they do. You know, seeking out kick returners and punt returners and putting a hurt on them is what they do. And you know, I've gone back and watched some film. You watch those two guys; they are like heat-seeking missiles on coverage teams. And you need guys who embrace the mentality of, hey, this is not just something that's a placeholder for me until I can get my big break as a starting safety or cornerback. This is what I do. And so they probably need a couple more of those guys. And I think in a lot of ways that's some depth issues on special teams is where that $18 million cap penalty again, I think may be hurting them a little bit. You know, some of those fine details are where they're being stretched to the max. I think next year they're going to be able to go out in the offseason and just get a few more $400,000, $500,000 guys who are special teamers like Hull and Robinson.
Evan, Mike Shanahan talked about how Lorenzo Alexander's not walking back through that door. So, you know,
especially not with a hurt foot.
Exactly. He's not walking through the Cardinals door either.
Good man.
Great guy. You know, but they're talking about trying to find that guy. They still don't have a captain named on special teams. Is there a void in leadership, and who do you see filling that role for the rest of the season?
I thought it was going to be Niles Paul. You know, I mean, that was the guy. I was like, well, you know, we're not going to miss Lorenzo Alexander that much because Niles Paul will fill that role. And he sort of hasn't really stepped up to the plate. I mean, we're talking about guys who are going to zoom down the field and make that big tackle that's going to, get everybody hyped up. And then there's something about when that happens, the offense seems to kind of pick up on that energy, and a lot of times seems to have at least a few good plays coming right out of a special teams. That really hasn't happened. I don't know the answer to that question. I wish I could tell you. I wish I could say that it's going to be this guy who's going to do it, but I haven't seen it yet. There's a real lack of energy on special teams right now. Part of it is new coach. Maybe they're trying to figure out what it is he does and who he is and everything. But a lot of
new guys and new spots too.
A lot of new guys, and I also think that it becomes one of those things. It's almost like a running back who fumbles a lot. Once he starts fumbling, all you focus is on the fumbling, and he can't get rid of the fumbling because every single defender tries to strip the ball. Right now, we're at a place now where the special teams is worried about making a mistake, and rather than just going out and playing. Like, I don't know that through 9 games they haven't had a game where there hasn't been one kind of really glaring error. Maybe there's been one. If there has, I can't remember it. But right now they just need to have one game where everything goes well, and then we'll worry about finding a leader.
I would agree with you there, and I think the other thing that's important to remember is that this is a unit that, for as much heat as they've taken, people forget they lost Brian Keel. They lost Keenan Robinson. They lost Nick Sundberg. They lost Lorenzo Alexander. All of those guys played a key role last year.
And then the coaches.
Well, what did that have to do with Sav Rocca's pass? He needed more loft on that ball.
I think the receiver just needed to know that
the
fake was on.
Yeah,
that would have helped.
Absolutely, that would help. Coming up in round 3 of This Week at the Park, we'll be talking about the matchup this week against the Philadelphia Eagles. Can they get this winning streak started? We'll talk about it next. Stay tuned. All right. Segment 3 of This Week at the Park. Talking defense. This is a defensive unit that started out the first 4 games with 15 sacks. That was on pace for a franchise record. Of course, everyone loves the franchise records that are put on pace after the first 4 games of the season. But in the 5 subsequent games since the bye week, they have only had 7 sacks.
Rob Jackson seems to be the only guy getting consistent pressure that can result in a sack.
Right. I mean, Ryan Kerrigan has had a few down weeks here. Brian Arakpo had one, but that was his first since Oakland.
That's right.
What are they going to need to do to get more consistent pressure? Because clearly it's something that is affecting, their ability to do anything on defense.
They probably don't want to blitz because
I know they don't want to blitz.
that's just going to leave open huge the opportunity for huge plays. But if you don't blitz, then the quarterback, pick your poison. Quarterback just sits back there, waits. Somebody's eventually going to come open. So what's the answer to that question? I think that, Ryan Kerrigan and Brian Arakpo, they were drafted to be the 2 bookend guys. That was the idea. We got bookends now. Mm-hmm. We're going to have lots of sacks from these guys. We're not going to have to worry about the pass rush. But, a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum, and it's not really materializing. Yeah, they might have a number. Again, talk about your on pace for. Mm-hmm. Ryan Kerrigan is on pace for double-digit sacks. That looks great on paper, but the quarterback doesn't seem to ever really be uncomfortable. And those are 2 different things. You don't need any sacks to have a successful pass rushing day. If your quarterback
either option is
you've got one of the
looking
top
very
receivers,
enticing
top
right
quarterbacks,
now. Right.
and top running backs.
Yeah.
So who do you stop?
I would have to say it's going to have to be Foles. He's the youngster who is still kind of cutting his teeth a little bit. Maybe you can confuse him with some disguised coverages and maybe just scramble his brain a little bit. Just throw a lot of different looks at him, and every time he looks up, make sure that he's looking at a different guy in coverage. So he's taking that extra second to figure out what exactly is going on. I think that's their best chance.
I'm going to have to disagree with you, my esteemed colleague, and say that they absolutely have to stop LaShawn McCoy. That is what makes the Eagles' offense go. He terrifies me. Even though I have him on my fantasy league, so I love him when he does well. But not when he's playing the Redskins. Yeah, when I used to play golf on a regular basis, sometimes I would go out and shoot like a 35, 36 on the front 9, and then my golf pro used to say you were set for a market correction in the second half, and then then I'd shoot 47, on the back 9, and I think that's kind of what we're looking for with Nick Foles. We're set for a market correction with Nick Foles. 7 touchdown passes. That guy is not that guy. He's a guy who is stationary in the pocket, who is vulnerable to pressure. And I think that if you just you stop McCoy and then you let Nick Foles beat you, I don't think he can week after week. He might do it one week against a horrible team like the Raiders, but he can't do it against every single week.
The Raiders' defense isn't that bad. It's kind of middle of the pack.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think they're ranked just about middle of the pack, and then their offense is terrible. So it's the defense is on the field all the time.
Right.
I don't know. I really feel like it's got to be McCoy. Otherwise, McCoy will kill you all day long.
One thing to keep in mind, if you look at the numbers, actually, LaShawn McCoy is a guy who has been taken out of games this year. He's a guy that
and the Eagles have lost those games.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And he hasn't rushed for more than 20 times in a lot of games.
He's 60, 60, 180.
Right,
50,
and that's the thing.
70.
So he's boom or bust. He's either in the game plan or he can be taken out. And that's, I think that's really something that they want to put the Eagles in that position to do. I think that makes the pass rush better. I'm going to go with Evan on that one. But
it's 2 against 1. We're teaming up on you, man.
There you go.
It's all right.
Time for bold predictions. Favorite part of every segment. Tark, what do you got?
I got Nick Williams making a huge play. And
Dude, that was my bold prediction.
Well, I didn't know that.
Well, you went first. So.
But we got to work this out before the show.
Do you guys remember 2010?
All right.
Okay. Week 4, a guy named Brandon Banks gets called up from the practice squad. What did he do? He had 3 returns for 75 yards, including a 53-yard. I believe it was on his first return. Flipped the field. Redskins fed off that energy. I think they won 17-12. It was a weird number. I believe it was 17-12.
The beauty of that is that there is no film on him. What do you got?
I have to come up with something, since he stole my thunder here. The Redskins' biggest point differential last year was the game mid-season after 3-6 against the Eagles.
31-6, yeah.
Going to be a repeat performance. Biggest point differential of the season. Redskins went big.
I'm going to take Brandon Merriweather with 2 picks, 4 sacks for the defense. Big day. I'll go with a big spread as well.
Okay. All right.
All right. That does it for this week at the Park. Philadelphia on Sunday. Make sure that you tune in Monday morning for the Monday Morning Quarterback Show. And we'll see how it goes. We'll start this winning streak this week. Thanks for tuning in.